A bizarre and disturbing claim is gaining traction online, suggesting that the Epstein files expose Ellen DeGeneres as Hollywood's, quote, most prolific cannibal. The claim began circulating on X, formerly Twitter, after the U.S. Justice Department announced it had released all available files.
There are moments when a story doesn't just break, it detonates. Not slowly, not quietly, it hits all at once, spreads everywhere, and before anyone can even process what's real and what's rumor, the entire conversation shifts. This is one of those moments.
Related to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Those files reference hundreds of names across investigative materials, and almost immediately, conspiracy posts began to explode. One viral post claimed, quote, the Epstein files expose Ellen DeGeneres as Hollywood's most prolific cannibal. She ate children's flesh. Another post declared, quote, Epstein files name Ellen DeGeneres the most prolific cannibal. Vampires are real. The keyword Ellen DeGeneres cannibal quickly began trending. More posts followed. One user wrote, quote, thanks to the Epstein files, we now know that Ellen DeGeneres is the most prolific cannibal. Hollywood staying silent. Now we understand why she left the United States. Another described a supposed disturbing discovery and claimed she was given a title no one wanted to know existed. Some posts even shared edited or distorted images of DeGeneres to amplify the shock value. But here's what's critical. There is no evidence in the Epstein files that supports any claim of cannibalism. A community note added to one of the viral posts states clearly, quote, there is no evidence DeGeneres engaged in cannibalism. It is true that DeGeneres' name reportedly appears among more than 300 high-profile individuals referenced in the broader Epstein document index. However, appearance in investigative materials does not equal wrongdoing. Many names included in the files appear in third-party communications, interviews, flight logs, or peripheral documentation without any allegations of criminal conduct. Other well-known figures referenced in the broader index reportedly include Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, James Comey, and Oprah Winfrey, among many others. Being mentioned in records does not imply criminal activity. And as of now, there is absolutely no credible evidence supporting the viral claim that Ellen DeGeneres engaged in cannibalism. The question then isn't what the files reveal, it's why such extreme claims spread so quickly in the first place.
Today, I want to take you through some rare footage buried in the Epstein files and an absolutely insane conspiracy gaining traction on the internet. Let's get right into it. Now, as you may be aware, we have been thoroughly combing through the recently released 3 million pages of the Epstein files so you don't have to. I want to show you some of the videos we have found that caught our attention, like this one of what appears to be an older man in a blue sweater and 3 other people, one of them redacted, watching presumably a woman dancing. Now, these 2 people have been redacted by the DOJ to protect their identity. We've replaced the music for copyright purposes, but other than that, this video is unchanged. Take a look. Now, we've played a couple of clips in the past videos from an interview Steve Bannon did with Jeffrey Epstein sometime in 2019, but we took the time to go through the nearly 2-hour interview and pull the footage that you may have never seen before. Remember, this is a video that was allegedly intended to help rehabilitate Jeffrey Epstein's image. In one question,
because what started as documents, files, records that were already surrounded by controversy, has now turned into something much bigger, something louder, something that's pulling in new attention, new speculation, and a whole new level of reaction. And the reason for that shift is simple. A new claim. Not confirmed, not proven, but mentioned. And that one mention was enough to ignite everything all over again. Now suddenly, people aren't just talking about the past, they're talking about connections, possibilities, Associations that may or may not even exist beyond a single statement. And yet, that's all it took. Because in situations like this, perception moves faster than facts ever could. Let's break down why this is exploding the way it is. First, you've got a case that already carries massive weight. The kind of case that people never fully stop talking about. It sits in the background, always ready to resurface the moment something new appears. And then something new does appear.
Bannon asks Epstein about Wall Street. Roll the clip.
First got on the trading desk at Bear Stearns in the late 70s or mid 70s. Were you shocked by how little actual understanding of mathematics that the traders comprehended?
Yeah, well, again, we had a Texas Instrument calculator. Most stockbrokers, especially before 1975, if they were good stockbrokers, could add. That's about it. They could multiply. If you could multiply, you were already in the top 15% of stockbrokers. Stockbrokers simply meant there's a story. When I went to the first person, I had no money. And I said, how much money do you make a year? And he said, $400,000. I said, impossible. I'm making $10,000.
That's probably more than your family had made in his entire existence.
Yes. And he makes it in a year. I said, what do you do? And he said, it's too complicated for you to understand. He had a brother-in-law, in fact, in this case, who ran the pension fund at General Motors. His brother-in-law would call him and say, buy 1,000 IBM. He'd hang up the phone, he'd write it out on a ticket and walk it to a window. That was his entire skill set. Hello, write what my brother-in-law says, walk it to a ticket window.
Now here is where he applies his thinking about Wall Street to world leaders.
You find most leaders financially illiterate, economically illiterate.
Most political leaders don't come out of a background of finance. Most political leaders come out of a background of being popular. So in some of the countries, in some of the African countries, for example, they might have been a military person. They were a general. Or in our country, they would have been an actor. The knowledge of money they don't have expertise, they have no degrees in finance. And this is one of the major problems. So many world leaders who don't really have a financial underpinning make fundamental errors when it comes to money on a country or institutional level. Many of them were just good at what they did in terms of politics. Remember, world leaders are politicians in general. They're not scientists, they're not intellectuals, they're not great thinkers, they're great politicians.
Now, for some context, Jeffrey Epstein was imprisoned in 2008 after pleading guilty to state charges of soliciting prostitution and soliciting a minor for prostitution. Here is his account of what it was like.
Solitary confinement, September 14th. And again, some of the public stories about the wonderful time I had in jail and my work release, which didn't come till months after. I'd been there since June, in an 8x10 cell with a bed in the back, a 6-foot bed in the back, a chrome sink with a toilet attached to it, and a little piece of metal sticking out that was supposed to act as a table. So in jail, I was in a place what's called the Special Housing Unit, which is for the roughest, toughest, meanest people. They had put me there, they said, for my own protection. So I was in an 8x10 cell with a little slit in the door where they would serve my food on a tray about 9 inches by 4 inches. And then as soon as I finished eating, they would take the tray and close it down. And one of the guards said, do you understand there's Wall Street's crashing? Sorry, Wall Street's crashing? What's happened? And he said, there's some crisis and some companies are going bankrupt. Yeah, it's all over the papers. We're all terrified. We're going to lose our life savings.
A voice enters the conversation. A claim is made, and within seconds, it spreads. Not because it's verified, but because it's shocking. Because it introduces a name into a narrative where people weren't expecting it. And once that happens, there's no going back. Because now the conversation isn't just about what's documented, it's about what could be connected to it. And that what if space. That's where things get out of control. You can already see the pattern repeating. Social platforms light up. Clips start circulating. People start analyzing every word, every detail, every possible implication. And suddenly, Something that was one part of a much larger story becomes the center of attention. Not because it's confirmed, but because it's compelling. And that's the uncomfortable truth about situations like this. Compelling narratives spread regardless of their accuracy. Now here's where things...
Because we have either a 401k or our pension funds, we don't know anything about money. Mr. Epstein, can you tell us, like, what's going on? Am I going to be able to afford my children's education? Am I going to be bankrupt, like this company called Lehman Brothers? And there's another company in the front page today called Bear Stearns. Oh no, I said.
Now this next part, pertaining to what life was like in prison, is very interesting. Roll the clip.
At the beginning, what were the comments?
It serves you fucking rich guys right that you're here next to me.
There was nothing about your crimes.
No.
So all this rumor you hear all the time about people in prison that commit the type of crimes you commit, you're saying in your personal thing is not true.
No.
It was all because you were rich.
Yes.
And it was all because they wanted to borrow money.
Or get advice. Yes.
What, they get advice to
stock
go long, to go long?
Yes,
Are you telling me
is this time to buy?
You're telling me in solitary confinement they're interested in going long?
Yeah. They want to know what
does that say
stocks...
about human nature?
Well, what I think that people find, one of the reasons they wanted to keep me in solitary confinement was they're afraid that everybody would want to know which stocks to buy.
I want to take a break from that right now to show you some more rapid-fire clips from the files, like this one, where Epstein is seen chasing around two girls in the kitchen. You may have seen it before, but take a look. And this one of a redacted individual in what appears to be a bikini modeling. Now, earlier I mentioned some conspiracies, and I want to talk to you about what the internet has been cooking up, and this one is insane. I need to address something that's been blowing up online since these files started dropping, because every time these documents like this get released, the internet does what the internet does. So there's a claim circulating right now that the Epstein files reveal Ellen DeGeneres as, and I'm quoting this directly from the posts, Hollywood's most prolific cannibal, that she consumed human flesh. People are sharing distorted images of her face, writing paragraphs about underground dystopias, calling her a vampire. Now, these are completely unfounded claims with no evidence to back them up. So let's take a look at what's actually in the files. Ellen DeGeneres is named in the Epstein documents, and that part is real. Her name appears in the broader index of over 300 high-profile individuals that show up across the investigative materials. You know, flight logs, communications, third-party interviews, peripheral records. But here's the thing that people either don't understand or choose to ignore. Being referenced in an investigative file is not the same as being accused of a crime. There are plenty of names in the file that are just referenced by a third party. There is zero evidence in the Epstein files connecting Ellen DeGeneres to cannibalism or any other wrongdoing. That claim is completely fabricated. Community notes on the original X post flags it. The documents themselves contain nothing remotely close to it,
Things get complicated. When a claim like this surfaces, there are two immediate reactions. One side treats it as a revelation, something that needs to be explored, investigated, taken seriously no matter what. The other side sees it as speculation, something that shouldn't be amplified without proof. And those two sides don't just disagree, they clash. Hard. Because both sides believe they're right. One is focused on giving every voice weight. The other is focused on protecting against misinformation. And in the middle of that clash, the story grows. Faster and faster. Because conflict fuels attention. And attention fuels amplification. Now layer on top of that the fact that this isn't just any random situation. This is something that already has a global spotlight attached to it. So when new claims emerge, they don't stay contained. They spread internationally. Different media outlets pick it up in different ways. Different communities interpret it through different lenses.
House Oversight Committee that is investigating the Epstein saga. This is something we were previewing. We were waiting for him to testify. And I want to do a deeper dive into Darren Indyke in light of what he testified to. And considering the name Indyke, when you type that in to the DOJ's website for the whole Epstein files library, when you type in Indyke, comes up 30,000 results. Now, this is a man who has never been arrested. He has never been charged. But to give you an idea about why he is so potentially important, according to the BBC, there are court filings that show that either Indyke or Epstein's accountant, Richard Kahn, who we did a whole sidebar on as well, usually, quote, had signatory authority over virtually all of the accounts held by Epstein. And I'm talking dozens and dozens of accounts. Now, if that's the case, then what were they authorizing payments for, and what did they know? Those are the central questions, right? And it should also be noted that after Epstein died, both Kahn and Indyke, they were managing the settlements that were paid out from the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund to victims. We're talking payouts of over $121 million to more than 135 survivors. So they were definitely a part of Epstein's world. Now, in the Epstein files, I will tell you also this, to show you how important he is, how central he is, the feds actually created a diagram of Epstein's inner circle. Guess who's right at the top, right above Epstein? Indyke, okay? Now, here is what he had to say in his opening statement to the committee, which was released publicly. I will tell you the deposition itself was private. It's not clear if it's going to be released publicly at a later date. We don't have the full transcript. We don't have any video of it, but we get a sense of some of the things that he said. So, Indyke said, "My complete lack of involvement in that misconduct is a matter of record. Not a single woman has ever accused me of committing sexual abuse or witnessing sexual abuse, nor claimed at any time that she or anyone else reported to me any allegation of Mr. Epstein's abuse. He led two entirely separate lives, his professional one and the other a private, personal one that caused many others to suffer. That I did not know what my client did in his private life may be difficult for some to believe, but it is true." And he explained he was only one of several lawyers that Epstein used, that he had a strictly professional relationship with him, adding, "My primary role was to provide corporate, transactional, and general legal services to Mr. Epstein and his companies, and I did so." And Indyke also provided a bit more insight into Jeffrey Epstein as a client, like how he had trouble getting approved for a credit card after JP Morgan Chase cut ties with Epstein after he was convicted of sex crimes in Florida. Remember, solicitation of prostitution, procurement of a minor, solicitation of prostitution, including a minor. That's basically what we're talking about. Quote, "It is undisputed that during this time period, Mr. Epstein had difficulty accessing credit cards from major banks." And again, I think this is referring to cash withdrawals that he apparently made for Epstein over the years. Now, Indyke said that he never tried to get around the bank's policies on cash withdrawals and that he never believed that the money was used for, quote, improper purposes. He said, quote, "For a person in Mr. Epstein's financial position with 5 multi-million-dollar residences staffed by dozens of employees and with an extensive travel itinerary, it did not strike me as unusual that Mr. Epstein's business, household, and personal needs required large amounts of cash on a regular basis." Now, I'm going to get more into the accusations, but one of the things that Indyke was accused of, he was accused of helping facilitate same-sex.
And before long, you've got multiple versions of the same story circulating at the same time. Some cautious, some exaggerated, some completely detached from the original context. And that's when things become impossible to control. Because once a narrative fragments like that, there's no single source of truth people are relying on anymore. There are just versions. Endless versions. Now let's talk about the impact of simply being mentioned in a situation like this. Because that's the part people underestimate. Even without confirmation, even without evidence, a mention alone can change everything. Reputation becomes part of the conversation instantly. Public perception shifts overnight. And suddenly, a person who wasn't even directly involved in the ongoing discussion is now being pulled into it from every angle. That's the power of association. And it's also the danger of it. Because once that association is out there, it's almost impossible to separate it cleanly from the narrative.
Sham marriages for immigration purposes, right, to get around immigration requirements and immigration law. And there was court paperwork from the government's case against JP Morgan Chase that said this about an alleged victim, quote, "During the latter part of this period, she was forced into an arranged marriage to another victim that was facilitated by defendant co-executor Indyke to prevent the other victim from being deported. Indike and a New York immigration lawyer retained by Epstein prepared the victim for communications with U.S. immigration officials almost immediately after the wedding. When the victim inquired about ending the marriage and leaving Epstein's circle, Indike repeatedly tried to talk her out of a divorce and threatened that she would lose Epstein's and his associates' protection. Now, Indike called these allegations 100% untrue. There were references, by the way, to this marriage or these marriages in the Epstein files, maybe seemingly. So, for example, you have this email from Redacted to Epstein, 2013. Good morning, Jeffrey. We are going now to get marriage license, and she's asking if it's possible to meet with you because she has some questions. Now, in terms of Epstein's crimes and what he was accused of doing, Indike said, quote, he was adamant that he had no idea anyone involved was underage and personally assured me he would never again let himself be in that position. I believed him, and I made the mistake of believing Mr. Epstein that he would not again commit a crime. I deeply regret doing so. Most importantly, I feel horrible for those women whom Mr. Epstein abused. So again, that's his justification for continuing his relationship and his work with Jeffrey Epstein after Epstein was convicted out in Florida. Now again, I want to make this clear. We don't have the video. We don't have the transcript of the deposition. But we have kind of his opening statement. We don't know exactly the questions that were asked, right? The tone, all of that. Having said that, this is big. In terms of whether or not Darren Indike was telling the truth, I want you to listen right now to what Representative Dave Min had to say to reporters. Look at this.
I'm an attorney, a former law professor, had the chance to ask a few different lines of questions earlier with Mr. Indike. And I have to say, I'm very surprised that he did not take the Fifth Amendment. I think it's very likely he perjured himself over and over and over again. And just to give you a few examples, I'm not going to go into detail, but he claimed, and I think this is in the statement you all received, that he had no knowledge of any women or girls, and yet that doesn't account for the fact that numerous women have described how he helped them fix their problems. One woman had described how he had helped her get an apartment. He helped women with their immigration issues. He reportedly told a number of women not to talk to police when the police started investigating Epstein. It's just not credible to claim that you had no knowledge of what was happening. I asked, among other things, about the $725,000 that he withdrew in cash at the maximum level of $75 to $100 per withdrawal. That doesn't trigger federal reporting. He couldn't describe what that was for, just kind of, again, claim no knowledge and don't want to get into the details. You'll read the transcript, but this is just not credible. What is also really something that is incredible is that the FBI and Department of Justice had never interviewed Mr. Indike or Mr. Khan, even those people were central figures in the Epstein files and the scandal around the rapes, the human trafficking, and all that. And I just want to applaud Robert, Jasmine, Summer Lee, who's not here with us, because it's under their leadership that we are moving forward right now. And I think what has become crystal clear over the course of these last few depositions is that these people are going to lie to us over and over and over. And what is really important is that we get the documents, because the documents are the things that can actually show us what actually happened here. I suspect he's going to give a few more hours of saying how he knows nothing in defiance of actual evidence showing he knew.
Even if nothing comes from it later, people remember the connection, not the outcome. And that's what makes moments like this so volatile. Now zoom out for a second. Look at the bigger picture. What we're really seeing isn't just a reaction to a single claim. It's a reaction to years of unresolved questions, unanswered details, and a story that never fully settled in the public mind. So when something new enters that space, it doesn't land on neutral ground. It lands on top of everything that came before it. And that creates an immediate intensity that's hard to contain. Because people aren't just reacting to the present moment. They're reacting to everything they've already heard, believed, or questioned in the past. And all of that gets mixed together in real time. That's why this feels so explosive. It's not just new information. It's new information colliding with old uncertainty. Now here's the part nobody likes to admit. Not every claim that spreads ends up being substantiated. But that
Classified at the top of every single page. There's absolutely no reason to withhold an unredacted version of this document from the U.S. Congress. In order to assist my investigation into this matter, I demand that you immediately authorize the release of this document. Now is not the time to cover up for Epstein and his network of criminal pedophiles and enablers. Accordingly, please provide a fully redacted copy of the May 18, 2015 memorandum prepared by the director of the OCDETF Fusion Center. Now, if you put this into context, we know that the DOJ, the administration, has come under a lot of fire, a lot of scrutiny, that there are materials that were redacted, that were not fully released, that the allegation is that they're covering something up, right? That they're covering up certain allegations. I did a whole sidebar on these unverified accusations against the President of the United States, President Donald Trump, and the idea of there was missing pages, there was missing interviews, and so this is another allegation that is in line with that narrative. By the way, Wyden followed up with a series of posts on X about this, calling it a stunning interference, reeks of a cover-up. And he told, by the way, CBS News back in February, it appears Epstein was involved in criminal activity that went way beyond pedophilia and sex trafficking, which makes it even more outrageous that Pam Bondi is sitting on several million unreleased files. And Wyden also wrote on X, huge, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, Trump's former personal lawyer, who was also responsible for Ghislaine Maxwell's transfer to a cushy Club Fed, has intervened to block the DEA from providing details of a mysterious Epstein investigation to my finance committee team. So then, guess what happened? Todd Blanche wrote back, posted on X. Huge, so he's basically making fun of Wyden, huge, a sitting U.S. senator has completely fabricated a story for clicks. No one is blocking anything. This DEA report is available to members of Congress unredacted in our reading room. By the way, that's in relation to the fact that, yes, members of Congress are granted full access to unredacted files at DOJ headquarters. Always has been, of course, at Ron Wyden has never bothered to visit. So you're seeing two different narratives, back and forth allegations. Okay. We got this 69-page memo in the Epstein files. And yes, it is titled Chain Reaction. It is from the DOJ's Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force's Fusion Center to Assistant Special Agent in charge of the Special Operations Division. According to CBS News, this was set up back in the 1980s to fight drug trafficking. The Fusion Center was opened in 2009 as a way to kind of gather all of this information and have a place to share it between law enforcement agencies. So we're talking about a very secretive intelligence unit of the DEA and a task force that is fighting crime coming in from all different kinds of countries. Now, according to Bloomberg, this all began when an informant came forward with an allegation that Epstein was part of a club drug operation, right? I mentioned it before, ecstasy, ketamine, meth, and also, by the way, prostitution. And I should also tell you, Bloomberg reports that under this chain reaction operation, the feds went after a dozen people in New York, including members of the Genovese crime family on racketeering, gambling, drug trafficking charges. So this is a big deal. But you go back to this memo, okay? Bloomberg reports that in 2015, the DEA requested that the OCDETF's Fusion Center create this target profile memo on Jeffrey Epstein, and also with respect to other individuals and businesses to potentially support a further investigation. Now, a lot of this memo, the one that we see, it is redacted, but Epstein is clearly visible. It says target
doesn't stop the impact from happening. Because by the time verification catches up, the narrative has already traveled. Opinions have already formed. And in many cases, those opinions don't change even if new facts emerge later. That's the reality of how fast information moves now. It doesn't wait. It doesn't pause for confirmation. It just goes. And that speed? It's both powerful and dangerous. Because it means stories can gain massive traction before anyone has a chance to fully understand them. And that's exactly what's happening here. Now the backlash. Because that's the other side of this. As quickly as people amplify a claim, others push back against it. Calling for caution. Calling for verification. Questioning the credibility of what's being said. And that pushback is just as loud. Just as intense. Because the stakes are high. Not just for the people involved, but for the integrity of the conversation itself. People are starting
profile Epstein. DEA reporting indicates the above individuals are involved in illegitimate wire transfers, which are tied to illicit drug and/or prostitution activities occurring in the U.S. Virgin Islands and New York City. CBS also reporting that its sources said the DEA wouldn't have even opened this or been a part of this unless there was some sort of narcotics connection. So you have Epstein, you have these 12, 14 individuals, 2 businesses, mostly redacted, although there has been some reporting on who these people and businesses could be. Couldn't independently verify it, but you can take a look if you want. It says target for Jeffrey Epstein, right? That's the focus. That's what we want to focus on. And you're only talking about financial reporting from 2010 through 2015. That's what's included in this report. And it says that Epstein was the subject of 7 unified suspicious activity reports So 2015, 2014, 2013, totaling over $5.6 million. Now, financial institutions have to file these. They file these when they detect any evidence of potential illegal activity, money laundering, fraud, things like that. So usually FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, is a part of this. It's part of the Treasury Department. You also see in this memo currency transaction reports. This is when financial institutions have to file these when there is a cash transaction that exceeds $10,000 a day. A lot of this can be standard, a lot of it's pro forma. It doesn't always mean criminal activity, but just have to note it. But this memo says that the targets, including Jeffrey Epstein, are part of the following case. DEA, New York. There is a case number. It was opened in December 2010. The status was pending judicial, so it was an active investigation. There's a section that talks about biographical identifying data of Jeffrey Epstein. They also talk about transactions that he was involved in, but also Epstein's guilty plea, right, back in Florida, solicitation of prostitution, procurement of a minor charges. But it seems, when you look at this, there was another investigation going on, and it was with ICE. Now, not entirely surprising when you think about that, as there was reporting that since 2009, so after Epstein pleaded guilty in Florida, you had the FBI, the Treasury Department, the State Department, the DEA, all looking into Epstein. So maybe not that surprising that you deal with ICE, but I mean, look at this passage. ICE reporting indicates Jeffrey Epstein pled guilty on June 30th, 2008 to state offenses relating to solicitation of prostitution and procurement of minors to engage in prostitution. In fact, by the way, under a linked investigation section, it seems there was an ICE investigation in Paris that was opened in June of 2013, closed that October. It was titled Operation Angel Watch. There was another one, Las Vegas, opened in 2009, closed in 2010. So you do wonder whether or not Epstein was under investigation for potentially harboring or transporting illegals, perhaps women, girls from other countries. But you look at all these agencies that are involved, DOJ, Secret Service, Customs and Border Protection. How about this? Harvard University Campus Police, Virgin Islands Police. The Harvard University, we know that Epstein has had a ton of connections there. They've come under fire for their affiliation with him and when they also ultimately cut off contact with him. There are certain transfers, wire transfers, financial transfers that were highlighted in this memo, like the Deutsche Bank transfers. By the way, Deutsche Bank came under a lot of fire too for seemingly continuing to provide services to Jeffrey Epstein, even after it said that it would stop. Apparently only closed his accounts after his arrest in 2019. You have a list of all of these accounts. There's a list of affiliated banks. But there's also companies that were connected to Epstein. So you have SLK Designs, LLC, Hyperion Air, which, by the way, I believe that was used as a holding company for Epstein's plane. CBS reports that SLK Design was headed up by two women that were part of Epstein's 2008 plea deal in Florida to those state charges. Remember, that was a way to avoid federal charges, and that they were named
to ask bigger questions about how claims are handled, about how quickly narratives are formed, about whether attention is being driven by truth or by shock value. And those questions don't have easy answers. Because both sides of the reaction are happening at the same time. Amplification and skepticism. Belief and doubt. And they're feeding off each other, creating a cycle that keeps the story alive longer than it would have been otherwise. That's where we are right now. In the middle of that cycle. Where every new post, every new clip, every new discussion adds another layer to something that's already incredibly complex. And the truth? It's still somewhere in the middle of all that noise. Not fully visible. Not fully understood. Still unfolding. That's what makes this so difficult to navigate. Because people want clarity. They want answers. They want something definitive they can hold on to. But what they're getting instead is fragments. Pieces. Moments that don't yet form a complete picture. And until that picture becomes clearer, the speculation continues. The debate continues. The controversy continues. And the story keeps growing. Not because everything is confirmed. It stays in motion. Unresolved. Unsettled. And impossible to ignore. That's the stage this is at. Not conclusion. Not resolution. Just escalation. And based on how things are moving right now, it doesn't look like it's stopping anytime soon.